Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being part of Crossroads, which is a project of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, and I'm really glad that you have chosen to be with us today, whether you are in the room or whether you are online. We have about 100 folks in the room and another 40 or 50 folks who have registered online, so a lot of interest in our topic today. And so I'm wearing a mask because I have a really bad cold and cough, so I would rather not give that to those of you in the room. So, right. Also, the other thing I should say is happy second funnel day. Yay! For those of you who follow the legislature, today is, well, actually yesterday, because they don't meet on Fridays, but it's the end of the second funnel, which means a whole lot of bad bills die, thankfully. And, a few good bills also end up dying in the process as well. But as I always say, bills die, bad ideas don't. So we know that they can always come back at some point in the session. Hopefully you're on our email list and you got our legislative update this morning. And do take a look at that. There's a couple of bills that we are emphasizing. One is the guns in schools bill, and that is just a really horrible idea. And the other is what we affectionately call the Baby Olivia bill, which is indoctrination of our children and what would have to be taught in health and human development in our schools. So take a look at that. If you're not on our email list, we would love for you to join, and please do fill out a form at the table over where Bridget is, and we'll make sure that you get on our email list. But today, we're going to talk about protecting the freedom to read. How many of you are readers in the room? Like avid readers? See, yeah, that's what I kind of thought. I know our crowd. We're going to talk about book banning, and from the perspective of an organization in Iowa that has come together and is fighting the bans on books and doing amazing work. Sara Hayden Parris is the founder and president of Annie's Foundation. She started in 2022 and is dedicated, Annie's Foundation is dedicated to ensuring members of our community have unhindered access to books and characters that reflect the diversity and complexity of the world around them. Through the power of this grassroots effort, the foundation, consisting of 5 Johnston moms, has handed out nearly 4,000 banned and challenged books and brought national attention to the overly broad Urbandale book ban list and the disappearance of little free libraries on school property in the metro. Sara has 2 sons in the Johnston School District and works at Iowa State University as the Associate Director of Student Health. Will you welcome Sara, please?
Thank you.
Oh, are you on?
I don't think so. Okay.
Yep.
Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Thank you for having me. So at Annie's Foundation, our mission is to ensure that members of our community have unhindered access to books and characters that reflect the diversity and complexity of the world around them. And how we all got started is in September of 2022, there was an attempt to ban books in the Johnston School District. Actually, yeah, we started in September 2022. The challenges took place in the winter of 2021. But the 2 books that they tried to ban were The Hate U Give and The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, both books that obviously feature marginalized characters. And we started paying attention to the school board meetings and what was going on at the school board, started going to school board meetings on a routine basis to make sure that our voices were being heard. And that's how several of us parents got to know each other, by being active and trying to stand up for what we believed in. And through that, we all met Ann Laurie Smith. She was a member of Plymouth Church, and she tragically passed away in June of 2022. And through our grieving process, I guess, and in response to all the book banning efforts that we saw taking place in the state, we wanted to do something about that. So we named this organization Annie's Foundation in her memory. we wanted to give her 3 kids a legacy that they could be proud of as well. So I know that somewhere Anne is laughing hysterically because we have handed out over 5,000 books now, all in her name and her memory. So, yeah. So, and we have actually recently expanded our board. So now we have 6 members, and we're all volunteer working moms. So this is like our second gig, because it doesn't pay the bills. So it's good to have an understanding of what books are being targeted by book bans. And the Des Moines Register collected data on all the book bans and challenges that were in Iowa schools over the past 3 years. And what they found was that in Iowa specifically, 55% of the challenges were books about people of color, like the 2 that were challenged in Johnston. 47% of the challenges were for books featuring LGBTQ people. And then, interestingly enough, about 25% of challenges were for books about people who survived sexual violence. So it's interesting to look at those statistics. Certainly, you know, when you look at who has the most books published, 55% of books are not written by people of color, and 47% of books are not written by LGBTQ populations. If this was not a discriminatory book ban, you would expect to see the numbers more closely reflect what is actually being produced. And then there's always a question about why they try so hard to suppress stories about victims of sexual assault. We know that it's really important for young people to be able to read those stories because they might be able to make some sense out of experiences in their own lives and realize that maybe what they have been experiencing is indeed abuse and not right, or they might recognize something else that's happening in their community or with a friend. So those are just really important things that our young people do need to know, and not talking about it doesn't help anyone. So it's interesting, since the would-be book banners are usually so passionate about you know, sex trafficking and protecting children from groomers, as they say. So this is one of the ways you can protect kids, and you're cutting that off. We know that representation in literature is really important. A lack of representation can lead to negative psychological outcomes. They feel invisible, unimportant, or less important than others, like my story, my voice clearly isn't important because no one else is talking about it. And it also leads them to believe that stereotypes represent who they really are. So if all they see are stereotypes of their identity in commonly available literature, then they assume that that must be who they actually are. But when we do have representation in our reading material, it encourages positive self-identity and self-esteem. It fosters empathy and understanding. And there's also obviously learning and education about your maybe your own identity, but also those of your friends. One of the reasons that I'm so passionate about this is that, you know, my 2 boys, they're white, straight, cis boys, and they are growing up in Johnston, which is very white, very affluent. And my background was very different. I grew up in Florida and Ohio. There's a lot more diversity. And I think, like, how can I make sure that they understand what it's like to have different experiences, to have darker skin, to be from a different country, to not be Christian? You know, how can they support their friends like that? And like, how do I instill in them that understanding and appreciation of diversity when they don't see, like, they literally don't see any, they're not exposed to it? And one of those ways is books. And when we're trying to take these books away from them, we're really taking away the opportunity for them to learn how to be good citizens of the world. There's a book published recently. It's called Teens Choosing to Read. And it's a really interesting study of, there's an inner city school where in 8th grade, the English classes, the teachers threw the curriculum out the window, and they focused on letting the kids choose what to read. And there was like 200 different books available to them. The kids participated in developing the list. And literally what they did for the year was let the kids read. There was some structured classroom time where, you know, they spent a little time reading, they spent a little time talking with their peers about the books, and then they spent some time talking as a class about the books. And what they found over the course of the year was that these kids went from non-readers, you know, even when books were assigned, they still only read maybe 1 or 2 a school year. They read over 40 over the course of a school year, and that's good for most people, much less, you know, 8th graders. And they were generally not passing, you know, meeting the standards on their reading tests for the state. And by the end of the year, most of them were meeting the standards, and they were really excited about that because for the first time they felt proficient and accomplished. And interestingly enough, the parents said that they felt like their kids became better people. They were more empathetic, more interested in like having genuine connections with their parents. They wanted to talk more. They understood more of like their decisions. Like, you know, they would read a terrible book about the sex trafficking and realize like why their parents didn't want them to go to the mall alone, you know, things like that. It helped put things in perspective. And the kids actually said that the books that they favored were the disturbing ones. So, you know, the other side likes to say, well, we're trying to protect our kids from these dark and disturbing stories, but that's what they relate to. And they can, you know, it makes them think about like what I would do if I was in that situation, or what would I do if a friend was in that situation. And these are all things that they need to figure out as they become adults anyway. So why not let them flex those muscles somewhere where it's safe and they can talk things out with their friends, with their teacher. Anyway, it's a really good book, and I would suggest that you read it. It makes you like fall in love with reading all over again because it's so magical for these kids. I love it. So let's talk about SF 496, which is what we call the book banning law. There are 2 parts. The first is that the books must be age appropriate. Now, age appropriate is a vague term with no legal definition. But basically what it boils down to is 2 parts touching. And this provision applies to all grade levels. And books that were removed under this provision were The Color Purple, The Handmaid's Tale, and Sold. So really common, popular books that many of you probably have a soft spot for. Then the second part is there's no instruction relating to gender identity or sexual orientation in grades K through 6. The way it's written, it's unclear if books are meant to be included in this. And when the judge was listening about the preliminary injunction on whether or not to hold SF 496 going into place or not, the state did say, we don't mean it to include books. But it's funny because the judge was like, well, you say that, but it's not written that way, and I don't trust you to change your mind later. So, judge did a good job there. And we also have 3 state legislators on record stating that the goal was the removal of all LGBTQ content from schools. So Representative Shipley is on record saying like, yep, Antango Makes 3, which is a true story about 2 male penguins raising an egg in a zoo. He said, yep, that one needs to be removed because it talks about gay penguins. And the other thing about this provision is that it's grades K through 6, but in Iowa, so many schools have middle schools that are 6th, 7th, and 8th, that it effectively bans them all the way up through 8th grade. Some school districts were even interpreting it to just not have any books about LGBTQ people because sometimes the lower grades would visit the high school and like heaven forbid they see a book called Heartstopper with 2 boys in love on the cover or whatever. So a lot of school districts were interpreting it very conservatively, and that meant, and I don't blame them for that because the law was so poorly written and so vague that no one really knew how to comply. But just imagine if you are questioning your sexuality, or if you are in a home with 2 dads, how it must feel to have your identities completely erased from your school library and not have any hope of seeing yourself in the books that you read, and also what kind of message that sends about who you are or who your family is. An example of some of the books that were removed under this provision are What Was Stonewall? So apparently we're not talking about history now. My Mom's Love Me, and Tango Makes Three. There have been 2 lawsuits filed against the state for this law, and it was supposed to be enforceable on January 1st, but a judge put a hold on it due to the lawsuits. So I don't have really any current updates on where that is in the court process, but hopefully it'll get resolved in the coming months, but at least right now it's not enforceable. So a lot of school districts did put what books they had removed back on the shelves. Others aren't saying whether or not they did. We're trying to figure that out. I know the register is working on that. So if your school district has not put those books back on the shelves, please encourage them to do so. There's some troublesome legislation currently. Thankfully, with the second funnel being yesterday, I think all of these measures are officially dead for now, although they do come back. But they are coming after your public libraries. There are several anti-library bills that were introduced this legislative session. In the fall, there was a failed referendum in Pella that would have turned control of the library over to city officials, including book selections. So imagine your city council deciding what books are appropriate to have in your public library. Some local officials were upset by the LGBTQ content available in the public library. Specifically, they're all worked up over the book Genderqueer. The referendum failed pretty resoundingly. So of course they don't take no for an answer. So they decided to introduce HSB 678, and that was modeled after that failed referendum where basically city councils would have had control over public libraries. SSB 3168 would have given the city council the ability to hire and fire directors. So we know that they don't tend to really care if someone's qualified to hold certain jobs, so they could fire their library director who is maybe LGBTQ friendly and install someone who is willing to do their bidding and censor materials. SSB 3131 would have removed state law requirements that local governments levy taxes for public libraries. And if this had been passed, it would have immediately closed several small public libraries, primarily in rural areas, because they need those tax levies. So all of these bills appear to be dead for the remainder of this session. I was just at another meeting last night with Sam Helmick, who is the leader of the Iowa Library Association's Intellectual Freedom Committee, and they said that they expect that these will continue to come up in future years, and also that they kind of predicted this happening. First it would be school libraries, then it would be public libraries, and they think that the next on the radar is academic libraries, which I work at Iowa State, so that is super concerning. I don't even want to think about where that can go. So what do we do in response to all of these book bans and legislation that's happening right now? Our signature event are banned book giveaways. We tend to bring anywhere from 100 to 1,000 books to each of these events. In 2023, we held 26 giveaways, and I said we've already had 3 this year. We've actually had 5 so far this year, and we've got another 8 scheduled already. And through those, we have given away 5,100 books. So I'm hoping that maybe by the end of the summer, we can be at 10,000. That means you all need to come to our events and take some books. Help us get there. We also hold annual read-in. A read-in is like a quiet form of protest where people who just love books, we get together and we read banned books quietly together. That always happens at the last Johnston Farmers Market of the year, so usually at the end of September. And that's always a fun event. And then we also do book donations. We gave 500 books to Polk County Juvenile Detention last spring, and that was super rewarding. We found that The kids that are in their care often discover a love of reading while they're there because there's not much else for them to do. And a lot of them have never really taken the time to sit down and try to read like an age-appropriate novel. So we were really excited to give them those books. And also, they had a really nice library in their education center, but all the books had to stay in there. So they couldn't take them back to their room and read them, you know, at night or anything. And they certainly couldn't take them home. But since these were all donated, they were able to be something that the kids could own, take with them, take home with them, hopefully share with someone. So that was really rewarding. We do a lot of education. So we do things like this where we talk to people and educate them on book bans and what we do. But also when we do have our events, that's a large part of what we do. Most people who come by our table have not heard of us. They don't know what we're doing. About half of them probably aren't really aware that books are being banned, and we get the opportunity to educate them about that. Very few people are not supportive of what we do. Most, even if maybe they disagree, they're willing to engage in civil conversation and talk those things through. But they're usually very interested to find out about like the local impact that it has and the kind of books that are being banned. So we enjoy that. We also offer advocacy and support. We attend legislative sessions as they relate to reading materials and have gone to protests. We're also happy to offer support to other parents and communities. We've gotten really good at freedom of information requests. So if you are in a school district and you want to know if there are book challenges that are going on, then we are happy to either help you fill out the freedom of information request. They're really not that hard. Or we are happy to do it on behalf of your organization and see what we find. We also helped, it was about 1.5 years ago, but the Ankeny Public Library had a challenge on a book. So we helped raise awareness about that and did some information requests on those records to find out exactly what was going on. And thankfully that ban did not go through. We also fill little free libraries around town. In the fall of 2022 in Johnston, we found that someone was going to some of the more popular little free libraries around town, and they had thrown away the contents of the library and replaced them all with Bibles. Which I see lots of Bibles in little free libraries, and that's totally okay. But you don't need to throw away all the other books to do that. So since then, we've tried to kind of like own and look over about 7 or 8 little free libraries in Johnston and Urbandale and just make sure the books that we put in there don't have to be banned. We're just trying to make sure that there's quality literature in there for those who want to stop by and pick up a book. We also just started something, I don't have it on the slide, but we started a grants program. It's named in honor of my aunt who passed away in 2017. So it's the Susan Bennett Grants Award. And what we're doing is we are offering $500 of in-kind donations to groups, organizations, or individuals who want the opportunity to offer diverse books to their community for whatever reason. And within like 2 weeks, we actually had 3 applications. We're like, oh, because we were only planning on doing like 4 to 6 grants because that's what we had the money for. But so it may be, closed down soon, but to start again next year. But really, we've been really excited about the response. And an example is that there was a group in Sioux City. They're planning a Children's Day event with like to celebrate Hispanic and Latino culture. And we are going to help them find books that are bilingual or originally written in Spanish. They don't want English books that were translated into Spanish because that's not like the authentic voice of their culture. So that's been super fun. They don't have to be banned. It still fits within our mission of making sure that there's representation in the literature. And so we're super excited about that. They're going to have their event at the end of April. So we're putting that recommendation together, and we get really good pricing on books. So that's why we decided to do an in-kind donation, because we can make sure that we're really stretching those dollars as much as we can and getting them a lot of books. So how it's going, like I said, we've really only been active since September of 2022, and a lot has happened since then. The first picture on the left is us at Moine Pride. That was a really fun event, 2 days, gave away almost 900 books, and we had a lot of volunteers for that. In the middle top there, we have, we were at an iCubs game last spring, and that was really fun and got us a lot of exposure to people who hadn't heard of us in the past. The top right is me and Andi. Andi's over there in the yellow jacket. She's one of our board members. That was us delivering those books to Polk County Juvenile Detention. So you can see 500 books is a lot of boxes. On the bottom left there, we did a drag queen story hour with Ray Gunn and Story House Book Pub and Big Mama Jean. And Big Mama Jean has done other things for us too. We really enjoy working with her. In the middle is one of our board members. We have a banned book selfie station. We can take a mug shot. You're in banned book jail. And then bottom right is our booth at Ragbri, which we had a beautiful location and table, and it was miserably hot and no one came. So it's a little disappointing. We also were instrumental in breaking the news of the Urbandale book ban list when that came out last fall. We got our hands on the list through a Freedom of Information request and got it out to the Register and other news outlets as fast as we could get it out there. So these are, you know, a lot of articles that we were cited in. We were really excited to be a part of exposing that. The Urbandale list was overly broad, removed pretty much every mention of gay people in the elementary schools. A lot of classic novels were banned in the older grades. And there was also a Norwalk list that came out shortly thereafter, and we were also the first ones to release that. And you know, it worked because in Urbandale, a week later, they pulled back and they still have like 60-something books on their list, but it's a lot better than 320. So we were really pleased that we were able to influence that. Oh, also how it's going is so at the end of 2023, I was named the Des Moines Register's one of their 15 people to watch in 2024, and that was super cool. But also it got us a lot of attention and donations, and we were actually contacted by a donor who said, what can I do to make Annie's dreams come true? And we asked for money for an office space, and they gave us money to rent an office for 2 years. So yes. They also funded the grants program that I mentioned earlier. So truly touched and honored by their generosity. We moved in on March 1st. It's in Johnston because since we're all working moms, it needed to be close or else we would never go there. But now we're super excited because we have a place to store all the books. Everything was in my garage, so I'm really happy to have my garage back. And no one ever wanted to come hang out with me and sort books because it's either like super cold or super hot. But now we have air conditioning and heat. So we are having a ribbon cutting on March 28th from 4:30 to 6, and we'd be delighted to see any of you there. And we would love to show you our office space. So why we do what we do, I love this picture. This is at Des Moines Pride, but you can see the person over there on the right who's like overwhelmed with getting to choose a free book that, you know, they see themselves represented in several of these titles. It's not like going to a bookstore and finding, you know, like one LGBTQ book that maybe meets your interests. Here we had a whole variety. And then I also love the two women who are looking at a copy of Melissa and talking about it. So what you can do to fight back against book bans and challenges, first is talk to people you know about book bans, because you will probably be surprised at how many people don't really know about it or have a vague awareness, but they don't think it affects them. So talk to them about it. Let them know that it's also an issue in public libraries as well. You can put pressure on the Department of Education to provide guidance to schools. This pertains to the implementation of SF 496. Right now, that's kind of on hold, but schools still need direction if and when portions of that law become enforceable, as opposed to the vagueness, which results in these overly broad book removals like we've seen. Show up, go to legislative sessions, go to school board meetings, look at your school board agendas in advance and decide if you need to go. Like, I don't go to that many school board meetings, but I look at the agenda every time to see if there's something that I feel like I need to be there to speak on. You can also, you don't have to go. If you see something on the agenda and you want to send your board an email, that works too. But just be aware of what's going on there. Support your public library. Again, you can do the same thing. You can look for their board agendas. You can let your librarians know that you appreciate them. Just say thank you. Send them a thank you card in the mail to brighten their day. And then also vote. Vote for candidates that support the freedom to read. That's really important. This past election, you know, we're a 501c3, so we can't get political, but we did ask different people who are running for school boards if they would sign our Freedom to Read pledge. And if they declined, we didn't say anything about it, but we did promote those who did say, you know, say this candidate signed our Freedom to Read pledge, if they support the freedom to read. Think about that at election time. And then make sure that you have diverse books available if you're in a position to. If you have a little free library, try to make sure that everyone can find themselves at some point in those books. Encourage your library to purchase diverse books. If you are a grandma, make sure that you're buying your grandkids books like Antango Makes Three, or the pronoun book, so that they are exposed to that kind of material and become open-minded and accepting, empathetic, all those good qualities we want them to have. So this is just some of the books that are banned, but warning, that may cause empathy. Side effects include tolerance, open-mindedness, and kindness. And then this is our contact information. Our contact information is also on the bookmarks that I believe are on all of your tables. So if you are interested in volunteering with us, feel free to send us an email. We'll get you added to our volunteer list. We tend to need volunteers for our bigger events because they're long events, and we just do like 2-hour shifts, but they are super fun. And we have a website there, and my phone's on there if you want to text me. All right, I think we're ready for questions now.
Thank you so much, Sarah. If you have questions, just raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you. Catch my eye and I'll know who I'm going to next.
You mentioned your office space, but you didn't give us an address.
Oh, yes. So our address is 5619 86th Street in Johnston. So if you're familiar with Johnston, we are kind of across from where the old Dolls used to be. And that information is, we have a newsletter you can sign up for on our website. So the information's been in there. It's also on our website at the bottom. And worst comes to worst, if you can't figure out where we're at, send us an email and we'll be happy to give that to you.
I just want to kind of share some information, but I do have a question. So I attended one of the Senate hearings, subcommittee hearings, and these legislators have heard how angry people are about touching their library, and they have said that. And so I just encourage people to keep the pressure up. And if you talk to somebody, ask them how they would vote on these bills, because they took a lot of grief from that committee hearing. And one guy came in, I'm a farmer from Waukee and I don't know nothing about coming here, but I came here because I love my library. So that's a direct quote
awesome.
from him. My question is, do you travel the state?
We do, yes. So we've accepted several invitations from other communities. We went to Jessup earlier this year. We went to Sergeant Bluff in November, and also Sioux Falls. We are headed to Iowa City and Cedar Rapids next weekend. We're making a weekend of it and just doing the Eastern Iowa tour. So we're happy. Since we all do work, it's hard for us to do anything other than on the weekends, but if we can make it work, we try. Yes, Nevada. Yep. Yeah, we get around.
I'm looking for the next question. I'm heading this way. And if you're online, put your question in the chat, please.
I love the slide that you had up there that had all the books that are banned with the warning sign. Can you get those made into t-shirts? We would love to have them. Seriously.
Yes, that's a good point. We do sell, but Andy is modeling and several other audience members actually are modeling our t-shirts. Yes, we do sell that shirt on our website from Raygun, and it also comes in black. Oh, it says read banned books. Oh yeah, he's got one on right there.
So go to Raygun or go to their website.
I love the wording on this.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the. Yeah.
Would you repeat that?
Yes. So if you want to buy one of our shirts, you can't go through like the regular Raygun store. You have to go to our website, and then we have like a special Annie's Foundation store that sells our shirts. We also sell our shirts at our events. So we usually try to bring those, and they're $25. And we get half of that money back. So you are helping us.
We have a question from online. Have you received any threats?
No threats. We are often the targets of a lot of hate speech, being called groomers and pedophiles. It wears on you for sure. And also you get used to it really quickly. You're like, well, another day. Since we have had our office, we have had one concerning incident of people, and we have a sign on our window that says Stop Moms for Liberty, and it appeared they were upset by that. What was that? Oh, yes. So I personally was targeted by Representative Jeff Shipley in it was a Twitter conversation, and I had tweeted in response to him as Annie's Foundation, and he then identified me personally as the person behind Annie's Foundation and accused me of grooming children. He said I needed to be criminally investigated for distributing pornography to minors. None of that stuff is true. He just can't accept the fact that the things that he doesn't like are not porn. So I did file an ethics complaint against him. It was dismissed in like 10 seconds, which was really disappointing. And I actually had a reporter reach out to me and say that she followed all of the ethics complaints and she had never seen one dismissed so quickly, and she didn't understand what had happened. But the good news is that in the meantime, there has been a legal organization that has reached out and is interested in helping. So he may be seeing legal action soon.
Where did all this banned books movement get started? How did it even, who thought up this stupid idea? And what's going on in other states?
Yeah, so I'll take the first part of that, or the second part of that first. Other states, generally, if the states lean more red, they have a very similar landscape as far as books, like Utah, Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania. They all are banning a lot of books. Wisconsin, even now, I'm seeing more stories. So it's certainly part of a pattern, and it's a very similar pattern because it's really a handful of people who are responsible for the majority of book bans across the entire country. So that tells you that, this is not concerned parents. This is like a targeted political movement. The current movement is mostly inspired by groups like Moms for Liberty. I mean, I hate calling out a specific group because, it shouldn't be political, but the fact of the matter is that it is. And in Iowa, they are the driving force behind that. So in other states, There are other groups that are more prominent. The whole movement kind of goes back many decades. There is a really good book called A Wolf at the Schoolhouse Door. I don't know if anyone has read that, but I highly recommend it. And it talks about really the push to privatize education so that, you know, the few can profit off of it and, you know, make personal and political gains. And so a big part of that is sowing distrust in this public school system. And if you say that there's sexually explicit materials in your kindergartner's library, well, that's a really good way to sow distrust in the public education system. And that's certainly not the case, but a lot of people don't do their research and they're just like, oh my gosh, that's terrible, you know, and they believe it. So there are other things that kind of fall into it, but you know, when you read the book, you realize that this is not new. This is actually just part of something that's been an ongoing trend for years. It's all tied into things like vouchers and charter schools and things like that. But you have to go back to like the 50s to understand like the genesis of all of this, but really fascinating and also like frustrating because you're like, how do we get this to stop? And then also kind of encouraging because you're like, okay, this isn't new. We've defeated this before. We'll defeat it again.
I have just a comment. I think it very curious that the little library books were replaced by the Bible. They obviously haven't read the Bible.
Yeah.
Thank you for your work.
Oh, thanks.
Concerning the approaching Des Moines City Council election, do you have any information that you're free to dispense concerning the positions of the various candidates on this issue?
For the Des Moines City Council?
Yes.
I'm not aware. That is a good point though, that we should look into and research their position on public libraries. So we'll try to find out some more.
Other questions?
I would like you to talk just a little bit about your fundraising and your needs for dollars to do all the programs you're doing.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we are, aside from the very generous grant that we got, you know, that's set aside for specific things, we are funded entirely by small donations, mostly through like cash donations at our events, online donations. It's really very much like community supported, which is super cool because we've been able to accomplish so much just by getting $20 donations here and there. So that's really cool. And we also then try to spend as much of our money as possible on books because that's what you're all supporting. So we try very hard to keep our other expenses very low so that we can buy as many books as possible. And then because of some different purchasing agreements that we have with a variety of sources, we're able to, usually I try not to spend more than $5 per book, but often I'm able to get them down to even like $3. So, you know, I might not always be able to offer genderqueer as often as I want to because that book is still pretty expensive for us to get. But, you know, I can, you know, for the price of genderqueer, I can get 4 copies of Antangle Makes 3. So we just try to be really cost conscious and yeah.
So they can give online?
Yes, you can give online.
Do you have a bucket here?
We do not. I didn't want to be presumptuous, so.
Thank you. Have you reached out for a meeting with Her Highness the Governor, Kim Reynolds?
I have not. We have invited her several times to the events where we're giving away All Boys Aren't Blue because that's the book that made her cry. But she has not taken us up yet.
what has happened to, excuse me, what has happened to the books that have been removed from libraries? Are they destroyed or are you able to buy them at cut rates?
Right, that's a good question. Every school's really handling it differently. Some schools are really cagey about what they've done with the books. Some schools have put them in storage especially while the law is kind of in limbo. They're hoping that at some point they would be able to return those to the shelves. And some have, just gotten rid of them. Where they went, I don't know. There was one school district that early on had reached out to us and said, would you be interested in taking these books? And then we never heard from them again, which is fine. Like I said, we do just fine procuring our own books. But yes, and I would encourage you that, especially as the lawsuit against SF 496 continues, if it does turn out that some of these materials are permanently removed from school libraries, that you ask what is being done with those books, because they should really try to make sure that they're, yes, not burned, not destroyed, that somehow they get back out into the community.
A two-part question. I would assume with all the books available, like in school libraries or could potentially be available, that a determination would have to be made, okay, what is age appropriate? Mm-hmm. And if so, how do you recommend that determination be made? What goes into age appropriate decision making?
Oh, that's a really good question. Most books to begin with come with a publisher's recommended age. The authors, when they're writing their books, they typically have an audience in mind with a target age, and the publisher will come out with a recommended age. And then also there are lots of, like, for school librarians, there's different journals that make recommendations, again, for like, these are the best books for elementary school, or, and even like early elementary and late elementary. And librarians are also, trained to be able to look at a book and determine what they think. They might have differing opinions, but, they're master's level professionals who are trained to make those decisions. And they also know the needs of their community and their school. So they're able to, put all of that knowledge together and decide what is appropriate. They take that very seriously. They have conversations about where, in a public library, where a book should be shelved. Is it more appropriate in juvenile or young adult? Or should this be young adult or should it be an adult? So there's a lot of thought that goes into that, and also a lot of different references that they can refer to when they're trying to decide what books are age appropriate, and then where the students can find them in the library.
As I recall, you had mentioned about donating books to the Polk County Detention Center. Was that a fairly easy thing to manage, or was there some opposition? Or when supervisors hear about that, will they turn it off?
Yeah, so the education center in the Juvenile Detention Center is actually managed through the AEAs. So I reached out directly to them and worked with them. And of course, the woman that we made contact with was just beyond thrilled, saw the value. And they do have very specific requirements as to like what kinds of materials. Like Iowa has one of the strictest restrictions for incarcerated people. But even then we were still able to, like, you couldn't have gang violence or drug use, and there was something else. So, a lot of like those uncomfortable topics that are prominent in young adult fiction were off limits, but we still made it work. And then, we didn't have any pushback. So I think they were honestly just so grateful to get the resources that I did expect maybe some, but no.
It's good to know the AEAs manage that instead of elected officials, as it should be.
We've already addressed this a little bit and in your talking, but like the Iowa I grew up in, I just never expected to be grouped in with Utah and Texas and Florida, and it's hard for me. And I hope, have you found pockets of real support? Have you felt allies around,
Yes.
specifically around, or even around the state?
Yes,
hope.
yeah. It's been really interesting because Johnston is actually the head of the Polk County Moms for Liberty chapter, lives in Johnston.
Wow.
Johnston's very active in that. So, we're kind of in the thick of it, but we still have far more support than, it's a very small vocal minority of people who are, disparaging us and saying that what we're doing is bad. And our success, I think, is, like I said, it's all small dollar donations that help buy these books. And I think that is a real indicator of our appeal and our support across the state. And, the fact that we've had some really rural libraries reach out to us and ask us to come, they're kind of quiet about it because maybe their town wouldn't be super supportive, but the people who know come and they really enjoy it. So I think that there's more, we just need to be louder in our opposition.
Yeah, I was thinking that's hopeful. Like maybe it is just the loud voices that are.
And unfortunately, they have the ear of the government.
And getting publicized and and getting heard. But so we just need to be.
Yeah.
That's good news.
Hi, thanks so much for what you do. I just have an idea. I look around the room and most of you are close to my age, I think, which means a lot of us are in book clubs. And I'm in 2, and one of our book clubs decided back in November that we could, whatever banned book you wanted to read. And it was such a great discussion. And I'm an overachiever. I think I bought 5 of them. So now I know where to donate them. And I think that some of the discussions that I've had opportunities to talk to some friends who really did not understand much. And I've been able to talk to them from very different angles. I was a language arts teacher for many years, and how it breaks my heart that I wouldn't be able to teach this beautiful book that Alexi wrote. It's even a graphic novel part of it. I mean, students would have just adored reading that book. So just an idea. Thank you.
Yeah. And we do have a book club. We meet at our office now in Johnston. But we read banned books. So again, if you're interested in joining, send an email and we'll get you on that list as well.
Would you put your slide back up that has your contact information?
No.
There you go. Any other questions? Well, will you help me to thank Sara for all of her work? And please do extend our gratitude for all of your co-workers, so to speak, and those of you who are doing that work together. It is important. And please do reach out to Annie's Foundation, whether you want to be part of the work, whether you want to donate, go to their website. It is important work, and it's important for us to raise our voices and be louder than some of the other folks in the state. So next month at Crossroads, we are going to talk about another really easy subject, because that's what we always do, immigration. And Erica Johnson from the Iowa Migrant Movement for Justice, I always mess that up, Iowa Migrant Movement for Justice will be speaking, and really not just talking about what's happening at the border, but really how to have a conversation with people who don't understand, who don't necessarily agree, but don't necessarily have information also. So it's going to be a really important conversation. So I hope you will join us. You will get that information by email. If you're not, as I said before, if you're not on our email list, we would love to have you join the email list, and you can get a little form from Bridget over at the table to do that. So thank you so much for being here. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next time.